Hi, my name is Becky Rose and I'm the author of a new role-playing game that I'm hoping to release next year. And this little series of videos is going to be revealing things about the game that I'm writing as I'm creating it. So it's like a designer's blog, if you like, to talk about design aspects of the game and decisions I've made and so forth. Now at the moment, there's some things I want to keep a little bit under wraps. However, I have had some questions from Ronnie Bradley about the cards in the game. Now, one of the questions Ronnie asked is, does the game use a standard set of cards like this? 52 cards, Las Vegas poker style. And the answer is no. See, I love card games. I used to be a member of several bridge clubs. I play French tarot with my friends. And I've previously designed my own card game. This is my French tarot deck. It's D&D themed, of course. You know, this is the Five of Blood, and this is a replica of a Middle Ages set of cards that actually goes up to 40 trumps for a game called Minciat. So yeah, I love card games. One of the problems when doing a role-playing game with a standard set of cards is there are 13 face values on the card, so it's like rolling a d13. And that's great if you scale your game to work with a d13, but I didn't want to do that. I saw an opportunity with cards to effectively have a weighted dice to unbalance things, to keep the number scale where I wanted it. So I set about designing my own deck of cards in order to do that. This is the first set of prototype cards I came up with. I printed them very small just to save costs because it was an initial prototype. And the basic premise is that I have the suits, they are the 4 elements. They are weighted in the 1 to 6 range, so it's sort of like a d6 based system, except there are some 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s. Some of the cards are in multiple suits, particularly the 7+ range are in multiple suits. And this gives opportunities to do things that you don't get in normal games. So yes, so I redesigned the cards, and this is my second set of prototype cards. There's actually 4 decks in this box here. I actually have about 8 decks in total for this at the moment. But so there we have, this is just a prototype design, but that's the 4 of fire. And the 4 of water. But this design is, actually, I tell you what, I'm going to put on screen a preview of the actual card that's been designed by my artist. So there are lots of gameplay opportunities that were opened up by designing my own card set. It allowed me to do things with the cards that I couldn't otherwise do. For example, I have a card that allows you to always win. Of course, it only works if somebody else doesn't play always win. And where you might think, well, what's that about? Well, it's kind of like, it's sort of like a critical in some ways. I have lots of different ways to interpret the cards in cool and interesting ways, particularly when you match all your elemental suits. So if you've got a flame sword and you lay down all flame cards, then something special happens. These kind of game mechanics allow for the actual mechanic of decision-making within the game, as it were, when you're determining if something is true or false, success or failure. It follows the theme of the game, and it follows the theme of your water wizard or so forth. Now, the art for all the cards has been done by a really talented artist by the name of Jason Olave. When I put this second set of prototype cards together, I found his images and I used them on the prototypes as I was still testing at that point. And I got in touch with him. I said, are you interested in selling me the rights to use your artwork in a game? And he loved what I was doing so much that he wanted to join the project and produce some new art. So that's really cool. So we're going to have some really amazing art pieces on. The cards are beautiful. They really are. What he's putting together. The artwork that he's doing custom for the project is amazing. And one of the other questions Ronnie asked is this a game where you have the cards in the middle and you draw off them? and I've done something very different there. My deck of cards isn't as big as a normal deck, it's 45 cards. Actually, this early prototype was 39, but after some experimentation I refined the deck and did some more mathematical analysis and came up with a 45 deck, which works a lot better. And 45 was an important number for me to hit because it's actually a production price break when I go to retail this later. One of the things I wanted to achieve with the gameplay, and I mentioned the always win card earlier, is you never quite know if somebody else is going to have an always win card. There's one of them in this deck. But each player has their own deck, and they can't cheat the decks because the decks are regularly passed around the table and reshuffled. The card game mechanic itself is a very quick to play hand of cards, using a special set of rules designed especially for the game, which are quite simple to learn. So instead of rolling dice to decide if something succeeds or fails, a quick hand of cards is played. It's just one hand, and that determines whether the action succeeds or fails. The card game itself is relatively easy to pick up. You'll pick up the basics within a few hands. But there's quite a lot of subtle complexities to the card game itself. It's actually a very deep and involved card game, and it involves some amount of reading your opponent, both a little bit like poker, sure, in reading their facial expression and so forth, but more actually the cards that are down on the table. The sequence of play is designed to be quite strategic. So yes, it is a game in its own right. And in fact, I've played with these cards using the game mechanic as a card game in its own right and had a lot of fun doing it. And I'm going to put rules for that in the back of the role-playing book too. Now, of course, designing a game isn't all plain sailing and not every idea works, which is why I had to redesign my first go at the cards. I had to go back and get the spreadsheet out and start doing more mathematical analysis. One of the bits of feedback I got was that it takes longer to play a hand of cards than it does to roll a dice. So I tested it. And surprisingly, it's quite comparable, because a lot of the time, players are very slow rolling dice. They take a while to find the right one. They quite often want to know what they have to roll on the dice, as if that somehow matters, before they'll actually throw the thing. Occasionally a dice is cocked and drops on the floor and such. So it can actually take several minutes on occasion to roll a dice. So on average, the time it takes to play a hand of cards in this particular game is about comparable to the time it takes a player to roll a dice. And it's a lot more engaging because the process is interactive. It's not entirely down to chance. Sure, you've got a selection of cards in your hand and they may or may not be good ones. But fear not, if you get a bad hand, you won't have it for very long. And if there's a few players at the table, odds are you won't even have to use those cards if you don't want to. That mechanic has been rigorously thought out and tested extensively with different numbers of players at the table. I mentioned earlier I have 8 decks of cards at the moment. That's because I'm doing a really big test with large numbers of players in order to make sure that my assumptions from the design actually work in practice. So I hope that answers your questions, and there'll be another video soon about After Forever After.